You're listening to The Wounded Healer, Journeys into Amazing Health, with your host, Star Waters, the wellness and transformational podcast giving hope and restorative health to those who are sick and tired of being sick and tired. Now, here's your host, holistic wellness coach, Star Waters.
Hello, and welcome to the Wounded Healers Journeys into Amazing Health podcast. I am Star Waters, and I am your host today. And today I am going to tell you about my experience as a wounded person becoming a healer to others. So actually, this was my first experience of what being a wounded healer is all about. And it started very innocently and very unexpectedly. Back in the early 90s, I was coming home from an amazing trip in Italy where I spent 8 days and 9 nights, and it was over the holiday season. So just right after Christmas, I boarded a plane and took a trip to Italy. Oh my gosh, dream trip. And on my way home, full of excitement, definitely wanted to share my experiences and all of my pictures with my families and friends, and just really high energy, geeked up, so excited, so blessed. Was able to go on this trip with a group of other people. I have actually won the trip in my days of doing home lingerie parties. So it was quite an accomplishment for me. And so I get on the airplane and sitting in the first row of coach and was just really excited. There was 2 young ladies sitting to my left. I was sitting in the aisle seat. And so I went to put my seatbelt on. No problem. I know how to do that. I've done it many times before. I love to travel. I travel all the time. Yeah, I grabbed that little buckle and pulled it around me, and I didn't quite pull it around me. I definitely had the belt buckle and was going through the motions of pulling it around me, but it actually kind of stopped in the middle of me. And I was shocked. Yeah, I guess that would be my first explanation as to what happened. I was shocked. And so I tugged at it and I pulled it a little more, and yeah, that puppy just wasn't going any further than about the middle of my body. And so I was embarrassed. I was humiliated. I was like, whoa, oh my God. I mean, I started thinking about everything that I ate on the trip, and trust and believe, it was a lot. I mean, those Italian people definitely know how to feed you. 6-course meals every day for lunch and dinner. And anyway, all of that started just kind of running through my mind. And did I overdo it? Wow. Anyway, I kind of faked the funk. I pretended like my seatbelt was fastened because this was pretty humiliating and I was very embarrassing. So what I did was I kind of put the end of the buckle up under my arm, and I pretty much held it there for that whole 8-hour flight from Italy to New York. So here's the deal. I'm sitting in the front row, the very first row of coach. And of course, throughout an 8-hour flight, you're going to have people that are going to be getting up to use the restroom. And many of them stood, either right to my side, my left there, or they were standing in back of me. And to my shameful self, I felt as though everybody on that plane knew that I was too fat for my seatbelt to fasten. So I was humiliated. I mean, it was rushing through my head, well, what's going to happen? Oh my God, this is so embarrassing. Well, I love to travel. So what will happen the next time I get ready to go on a trip and I Now I'm exaggerating. I waddled myself all up to the ticket counter and, all joyful and happy and excited and raring to go when they tell me, I'm sorry, ma'am, but you'll be required to pay for an extra ticket in order to go on this trip. And quite frankly, I was barely paying for the one ticket. Okay. So I became very depressed. So I know you're thinking, hey, Star, why didn't you just ask the flight attendant for a seatbelt extender? Well, I have that answer for you because I didn't know anything about a seatbelt extender. I didn't know anything like that existed. And I guess I did a very good job of hiding the fact that my seatbelt was not fastened because I'm sure within 8 hours after being served, pop or tea or coffee and peanuts, and they did give you a little bit more since it was so long, 8 hours, food and all of that stuff. I'm sure that if the attendant had noticed that I had not had my seatbelt, she would have maybe offered me the opportunity to get a seatbelt extender. But the bottom line is that she didn't see that I didn't have my seatbelt fastened. So, in my mind, during that whole trip, and I might add to the embarrassment and to put salt in the wound, so to speak, since now I am the wounded one, the two ladies that were sitting to my right, both, of course, had their own seat, but they were slender young ladies. So slender, in fact, that boy, both of them could probably sit in one seat and there'd still be room left over. So that made me feel even more huger. Okay, so here we go. So I was thinking, okay, what can I do? I cannot poo-poo this off. This weight issue is very serious now. I mean, I cannot go on like business as usual. I've got to come up with a plan and what I can do and not procrastinate and not put off. This is serious, Star. This here is serious. Okay. I pride myself in being a very well-dressed person, putting all my clothes together. Hey, as much as one could put together back in those days by being overweight, they didn't have the nice, fashionable, wonderfully designed clothes for larger women back in the early 90s. It was somewhere like around 91 or 90. Pretty much, you had these big muumuus, like tents or whatever, and these hideous plaids and prints and all of that kind of stuff. I did a little bit better than that, but still there wasn't a whole lot to choose from. So anyway, once I got to New York and got on the second plane that took me someplace halfway to the West Coast, my seatbelt fastened. I had no problem. I mean, just like take it in your hand and put it across your body, like I would have normally have done. And it fastened. No problem. And it also did the same when I got on the next plane to come into Portland, Oregon. Whew. Wow. Okay. So it's not as bad as I thought it was. I'm thinking to myself. And it was almost like I had a little angel and a little devil on my shoulders. The angel would say, it's not as bad as you thought it was. That seatbelt was just formed or something, something was wrong with it. Then the little devil would say, nah, nothing was wrong with the seatbelt, darling. Your butt's just too big. You got to lose some weight. I had this conversation going on in my head over and over and over again. But what I did do as soon as I got back to Portland, Oregon, my hometown, and got back into my routine, I signed up to go to OA. And if you don't know what that is, good for you. Overeaters Anonymous. Okay. Yes, a 12-step program. I felt like I had to do something. And so that was my first plan to, for real, get this weight off. And I failed to tell you, you're probably wondering, well, how big were you? Okay, I'll be honest. I was a double cheeseburger, 3 large orders of French fries, and a milkshake away from being 300 pounds. Yeah, it was pretty serious. Okay, so now you know. Oh, and if you'd have seen me, which I had a picture taken of myself New Year's Eve in Italy, had the most wonderful time at this gala celebration. And once I got home and got my pictures developed, I looked like a freaking sumo wrestler. So add that to the seatbelt not fastening. And yeah, I was in pretty bad shape as far as I could think of my self-esteem. So OA, Overeaters Anonymous, is where I planted myself every Wednesday and had like a little booklet that I had to go through and answer questions. And I kind of wish I could do that again because at the time I really didn't understand the whole philosophy of being powerless, even though I was powerless. And at that time, associating the two words food addiction, hey, nowhere, no how played into my mind. How could you be addicted to food? I mean, I just couldn't see the rationale in that. I mean, you can't not eat. Everybody's got to eat. So, how can you be addicted to food? Okay, people, I'm freshly, newly on the journey. Okay, so there was a whole lot of things that I could not connect the dots to. But that's part of my story. And so I find myself the wounded, the overweight one, the one who has diabetes, and I'm really putting forth this effort because see, here's how it usually was when I was quote unquote going on a diet. I'd start off on Monday. Of course, you got to start your diet off on Monday. I mean, that's just what you do. You have that one last hurrah, that one last binge over the weekend. You eat everything that you thought you'd ever wanted to eat. And then just miraculously on Monday, you're going to be a changed person. You're going to have a new mindset. You're really going to be disciplined this time. Okay. So I'd start my diet on Monday and I do really well of denying myself food and eating far less than I usually would. And then Friday, the end of the week, celebrate, Friday comes and you hang out with your friends and they always have that stuff that's going to make you fat, like the chips and dips and the soda pop. And Saturday, it's either somebody's birthday or a wedding. And, hey, listen, cake talks to me as well as potato chips and dip. Yeah, all that stuff. So when I'm out celebrating, socializing, while people are standing around chit-chatting, the food is talking to me. And so I find myself going to the refreshment table quite often. And so that usually ends the diet. And it will probably take like another week to get back on it because now I'm overeating. I've never binged. I've never been a binge eater, but definitely I would eat the things that were, I would say, I'm a carbohydrate addict. So I'd eat carbohydrates, which would send me off into an eating frenzy, but I wouldn't consider it that I was binging. So I did get some things together mentally by going to Overeaters Anonymous. And then I miraculously got into this Kaiser Project program for African American women that taught us how to modify the foods that we already eat because they had noticed that when African American women go to programs for weight loss and either they provide the food for you, like they have their own little foods that maybe come in packages like dog food or whatever, the women would lose weight. But once they got off of that program, the weight would come back again because they would go back to eating what they were eating before. So this Kaiser program project taught us how to modify the foods that we eat. And there were somewhere in the neighborhood of about maybe 60 to 80 women that were part of this group. And we would meet every one of the day of the weeks. And they would feed us and we would bring in our own recipes and we would learn how to modify, how to cook differently, and how to exchange fat grams and carbohydrate grams. And it was very, very informative. And I learned a lot. And from that program, I lost really my first, I would say, 25 to 30 pounds. And I was very proud of myself. And it was the beginning. We learned how to exercise, and it was quite interesting. And then I went from that to doing, I think at that time I had, my diabetes was acting up. And so I just started, I cut out the carbohydrates altogether, and I ate protein and veggies. And that worked really well for quite a while, very well. And I think altogether, maybe I had lost maybe like about 45 pounds. 45. Yeah, about 45, 50 pounds. And I held at that for a long time. I'd have these incredibly long plateaus where I'd lose weight, and then I'd get to a point where I couldn't lose any more weight. And sometimes the plateaus would last as long as like a year. And each time that happened, I was totally convinced that that's just where God wanted me. I mean, that was the way that was supposed to be, right there. And so everything was going fine. And my husband passed away. And after he passed away in 97, I was able to lose a little bit more weight because I didn't have anyone around me that bringing in potato chips and going out to eat a lot and stuff. And I lost a little bit more weight. So then came the plant-based diet, where I had gone to a raw food festival for a weekend in Portland, Oregon, the International Raw Food Festival, where I met all of these incredible raw food personalities. But I didn't know anything about them because I didn't know anything about raw food at the time. But they threw out a challenge, and I went raw for 30 days. And in that, I had lost considerable amount of weight, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I didn't have the hunger, didn't snack a lot like I did from other foods, and I loved it. And I stayed raw for about 8 months, and then there was no one that I knew that had that lifestyle, and it was really hard not having anyone to relate to. So I kind of let that go. And then my weight, it stayed pretty much the same. I didn't do the yo-yo thing, but I had come down maybe like about 4 dress sizes, and I felt good. It really wasn't where I wanted to be, but I wasn't where I used to be. And so I stayed there for a while, and then something happened. My diabetes started kicking back in again, and kicking in pretty hard. And on top of that, then I developed high blood pressure. And it was just incredibly hard to control the blood pressure. I did everything. I asked my doctor, what do I do? I mean, is there something I can eat? And I'd always get told the same thing. Nope, nothing you can eat. This is just part of maybe your family lineage or whatever. They take the history. So, of course, yeah, blame it on my relatives, blame it on my ancestors. I mean, I'm got diabetes and I have high blood pressure because my folks had it. Okay, that sounds reasonable. I'll go with that. And so, New Year's 2011, I found myself, started off as a very small sore on my stomach. And no matter what I did, it never got better. It never healed. It only got worse, and it got bigger. And it was, it wasn't good. It wasn't a good thing. I won't go into details, but it just would not heal. And it started off about the size of a pimple. And now at this point, it is about the size of a nickel. And so, not having any health insurance, I took myself to Grady Hospital in Atlanta, Georgia. And once they took my blood pressure, I mean, they ran me past everybody. I didn't have to wait any longer, even though I had been waiting already for 3 hours to be seen. And they took me up, put all kind of needles and things in my arms. And I was a little concerned because I have never been in the hospital like that under those kind of circumstances. So I stayed in the hospital for 17 hours. They wouldn't let me go until I took 2 insulin shots. I've never taken insulin before. And in my mind, sister, it's over. I mean, it's downhill from here on out. I started imagining my feet, my legs being amputated, being in a wheelchair, being totally dependent upon my children. Like I said, I love to travel. I'm very independent. And I was full of life, and I didn't want that for me. There was a gentleman that was in a bed across from me, and his family found him in a diabetic coma, and they're not sure how many days he had been there. And I mean, I just saw, wow, it was not looking good. But 17 hours after going into the emergency, I came out, came home with prescriptions, of course, medication, and I was pretty scared. Up until that point, I was not taking any medication. I was able to control the diabetes with eating vegetables and protein. No carbohydrates, but no, that wasn't working anymore. And so I got the prescriptions filled, and I didn't want to do this blood pressure thing. I really didn't, but it's a silent killer. I kept hearing that silent killer. So one day I was watching Netflix and looking for something new to watch, and I saw the title of a documentary or a movie or something. I didn't know. It was called Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead. And it really it was curious. I made me curious. I was like, what in the world? Fat, sick, and nearly dead. So I checked it out, turned it on. And for those of you who don't know about Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead, it's about a gentleman from Australia who came to the United States for 60 days to travel around the United States. And he was juicing. He was consuming only juice from fruits and vegetables. And he had all types of medication that he was taking for some disease that no one hardly had. But he did run into somebody on his path that had it. But anyway, he had lost like about 90 pounds or something like that in 60 days. And as I was watching this documentary, I guess I got into it like about maybe 10 minutes, and I heard this voice that said, "This is what you must do." Okay. I didn't need to hear it say it again. It came through loud and clear. So I did it. It took me a month to do. I had to get all of my ducks in a row, and I had an old Champion juicer. I had to get it all together. There were a piece or something that was missing. I had to order that. And on 11/11/11. Now, mind you, this is 11 months after I went into the hospital. I went into the hospital in January 2011. I started my juicing, and I had every intention to juice for 10 days. That's what they called a reboot. And by the way, this gentleman's name is Joe Cross. I mean, he started this juicing revolution around the world. And I happened to be blessed on my 20th day of juicing to go and meet him, see him in person in Atlanta, Georgia. It was the highlight of my life. We watched the documentary as a group. There were probably like about 300 people there. I got a chance to get my picture taken with him, and I was the juicing queen. I was whipping up juices in all different combinations and naming them and writing them down and sharing them on Facebook. And to make a long story short, I went way, way beyond 10 days. I actually went 67 days without eating anything solid, only drinking the juices of fruits and vegetables. Somewhere around day 40, I had my blood sugar and my blood pressure tested. It was normal. My blood pressure was normal. I hadn't had a normal reading blood pressure probably in 11 years, to be honest about it. But the miracle was I no longer had diabetes. I lived with diabetes for 15 years. 15. And 40 days into juicing, gone. Reversed, no more in my body. I was overjoyed. Overjoyed. I mean, it was a miracle. And from there, I decided, I am not going to be eating meat again or anything from animals ever again. If 40 days after living with diabetes and high blood pressure, all of this time, and within 40 days, my body had healed itself, I am sold, what do they say? Sold American. I am sold on this lifestyle. And I had lost a grand total from the time that I was over in Italy looking like a sumo wrestler. I had released 150 pounds, half of my body weight. Looking good, baby. Looking super good. Feeling amazing, sweetie. Amazing. Able to walk 8 miles a day, was jogging, was going up and down stairs. I mean, I had a renewed body. I felt like I was 30 years old. So I went from the wounded to the healer, and my journey was quite long. But once I got the formula of what it was to do, it was really quite quick. And so that's when I became a wounded healer, because from my postings on Facebook, sharing my story, I mean, basically, I was just saying what was going on in my life. I remember one day, just as a joke, on Facebook, I posted, I didn't want to tell anybody, but I guess I can kind of reveal now that I'm secretly on the juice, is what I said. Laugh out loud. Ha ha ha. And this one person responded back, girl, isn't that wild turkey something else? I drinks it too. And I thought, oh God, that's funny. Wild turkey. Then I explained about the juicing thing. So quite a few of my friends on Facebook were also juicing, and it was a wonderful world. It was a wonderful world because I had other people that were, doing the same thing that I was doing, and it kept me honest to that lifestyle. So that was in 2012. Fast forward to 2018. I am still plant-based. I still have a very nice figure. I'm in a size 8. I started off as a size 24. Or 3X. So I have definitely come a long way. Baby, lost half of my body weight, picked up a few pounds, but nowhere near anything that I need to be seriously concerned about, maybe like about 20 pounds or so. And from that, I have learned how to cook vegan food and how to prepare raw vegan food and the things that I have been able to help people to overcome. It's a wonderful experience being a wounded healer. And that is why I wanted to do this podcast, because we all have the opportunity to become wounded healers, because we've all had sometimes the misfortune of being wounded. Just because you have had an illness or a setback in your life, I feel that when you do find the solution for that pain, for the illness, you are blessed to be able to assist other people and to assist them in a way that they won't have to go as long as you did for healing. And that, my friends, my story of how I became a wounded healer. And I'm Star Waters. Thank you so much for listening to the Wounded Healer Journeys into Amazing Health podcast. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Wounded Healer Journeys into Amazing Health. If you enjoyed the show, spread the word. Also, go and subscribe. And while you're there, leave a 5-star rating and a review. We want to know your biggest takeaway from this episode. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at The Wounded Healer Podcast. Thanks again for tuning in. See you next time.